Action!
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Grudge Report, where we talk about the awesome sci fi show, The Expanse. I'm Margaret Reeb, Senior Development Manager at the SETI Institute, and I am joined, as always, by Franck Marchis, who is Senior Astronomer at the SETI Institute, Chief Clown who likes to make fun of me, and also Chief Science Officer at Unistellar. How are you doing, Franck?
I'm good, and you? How are you, Margaret?
I'm doing great, and I am excited today to dive into the episode, which is season 4, episode 8, The One-Eyed Man. We're getting to the end of season 4 of The Expanse. If you haven't watched this episode, if you're not caught up to this point, beware, because we're going to be spoiling everything up to this point, especially the science of this episode. So if you haven't watched it, hit pause, go watch it, and come back. But Franck, there is tons of astrobiology and microbiology and all sorts of cool stuff happening on Illust. But before we spend the chunk of our discussion there, let's briefly touch on some of the other plot points. So Earth was interesting this episode. What did you think of Avasarala's political movements?
Well, first of all, I will say that Avasarala was wonderful as usual. The style, the way she dressed, is everything in the scene, in the beginning scene, show that Earth is very stuck in the past, which is our time, with the design of the dressing room, the mirrors, and so on, and what she's wearing, very lavish, very old-fashioned. So that's the Earth that basically an Earth which is turned toward the past and doesn't really have this technology visible. And I like this scene, this beginning, the introduction when she gets ready for a speech.
And then I'm envious of her closet. I thought her closet was, I mean, she's always dressed very well, but we never see all of her options. I thought that was great. I also thought she did a great job with the speech about the fallen Marines, and the interaction with her husband after he figures out that she leaked some images was also very, very moving. She's a very political creature, though I like her very much. Let's talk about Mars, because there wasn't a whole lot of science going on Mars, but our girl Bobby senses something is afoot with this mission, this new job that she and her fellow thieves are working on, and it remains to be seen how that will play out. But her semi-boyfriend gets a job on Europa, which sounds like a decent gig because Mars needs ice. What did you think about that, Franck?
Yeah, I like the scene where basically first he announced that he has a job interview, because they still have this in the future, still have job interviews, and he has to basically probably explain why he wants to go to Mars, to go to Europa, and the job he's going to have is to mine ice, we say, on Europa. So people could wonder why Mars will need ice. And the obvious answer to that is because if they want to terraform Mars and bring water on Mars, well, they need to bring this water from somewhere. So maybe that's Europa is being used as a source of water for the terraformation of Mars, bringing ice cubes basically coming from Europa all the way to Mars and melting them to get rivers and lakes and hopefully in the future seas and oceans. I don't know if that's really doable, technologically speaking. It will take centuries, and they talk about that in this show specifically. But it's a task that they basically Martian seems to be okay to be doing. So why not?
It's culturally right, sort of. Since Martians are born, or since they come to Mars, it's very much all of their society is centered on terraforming the planet. Everybody's job is moving in that direction. They believe in this vision of Mars, or at least they used to, because now the Green Games have showed up.
What they say specifically is the garden for everyone, which is a very nice way of describing terraformation. There is a very interesting conversation between Bobby and her boss about that, where basically the boss explained that he has lost the faith into this terraformation agenda, and he's ready to abandon Mars and just make money now and leave the boat and leave the planet to have a better life on the new worlds.
One of the new worlds, yes.
Because the dream of Mars is dying. I wrote those down. That was also something they say specifically.
Yeah, I think a couple people say it. I think Bobby even says it because she's disillusioned after hearing her thief boss talk about how he's going to leave Mars in favor of one of these new worlds. So yes, I think this has been something that's sort of slowly been building on Mars in the show, and we'll see how it plays out in the final episodes of this season, because there's another big bad brewing, and that is Marco, who caused a lot of havoc and the destruction of a Belter ship and the Marines. I believe it was a Belter ship that he blew up, correct? Yes. And there's a kerfuffle, you might say, between Drummer and Fred Johnson, who appears on the Medina station where Drummer is working, and Ashford is there as well. And there's a lot of mixed opinions about how the Marco situation was handled. So there's not a lot of science there, at least as far as I saw, but there's a lot of setup for what happens in the next season and what happens in the rest of this season with Marco and the Belters fissuring into different perspectives on how to deal with the inners and the rain gates. Anything you wanted to say about the belt this episode?
This is definitely, I think, the episode that if you want to understand the season 5, you need to watch this episode and specifically this conversation between the three of them, because it clearly describes what's going to happen, what is Marco agenda, basically. He lied and he manipulated people, and he leaked this video as well. It's a bit like her Avasarala, the same kind of creator somehow. So he gets his agenda to rally all the Belters with his vision, and his vision is completely wrong, because he doesn't believe in peace. He wants to have a war forever, basically, between the nations, the Belters, the inners.
Right. So, there's no cooperate. There's no way to have a peace that isn't on his terms and isn't like very sort of putting the inners down and lifting the Belters up, as he says. So we'll see how that goes. So let's turn to the bulk of what I think will be our conversation, which is the slugs on Illis and everybody's disgusting eye discharge. So, for those of you who might need a refresh on what's happened to this point, everybody who is on Illis is in an ancient alien ruin to protect themselves from a tsunami, a giant wave. But when they got into this ruin and sealed themselves inside, they found themselves in an ecosystem with things that invaded their eyes, that made them go blind, and also slugs that fall from the ceiling onto you and make people die. Though at the beginning of the episode, they aren't quite sure why. So I think when this episode starts, just about everybody is blind except for Holden. Is that right, Franck?
That's correct.
Yes. Yeah. And he's go ahead.
We're going to talk about the slug first, and then we can talk about the green blindness, because if we mix them up both, it's going to be impossible to follow the science here.
All right. Tell us the slug science.
So the slugs, I found out that in the book they call them the death slugs. Those are kind of life forms from the planet, so from Ilus or from Nutera, depending where you want to call it. And they seems to be kind of living in the ocean somehow. That's the analysis they made, so that they have a lot of oil and water. But during the tsunami, they come into the relics, the ruins, and stay on the roof. And when they fall on people, they somehow, with the contact, after a few minutes, not even, people die. And it doesn't seem to be a pleasant death, meaning that it's not like they die, they turn off. It's basically they suffer a lot. So Dr. Yes. At the beginning of the episode, basically, she has one slug. She's blind, so she's relied totally on Holden to do everything.
to read things that he can't pronounce.
Exactly. And that's you're gonna make fun of me because I'm also like him. I cannot pronounce things.
Well, you're not a biologist, right?
I'm not a biologist, so I have a good excuse. Okay. So those slime that they have seems to contain a neurotoxin. Okay, and they did not use any random neurotoxin. They didn't make up something. They use a real one that truly exists, which is called coniine. And I did some bit of research on coniine. It's a molecule which has a structure exists on Earth. Okay, so it has the same structure than Earth's molecules. Okay, made mostly of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and so on. And in the show, in fact, they describe two of the structure of the coniine. They call that stereoisomers. So basically, a molecule can have one orientation or another orientation and have exactly the same composition. And in this case, there is the S plus and the R minus or something like this, which are the two geometrical way of building this molecule. So I found out, beside the chemistry, that this molecule does exist on Earth. And in fact, you can find it quite easily. It's in a plant called hemlock, poison hemlock or hemlock.
Yeah.
They kind of look like carrots. If you look at them, they're the same family, in fact, but they're extremely.
It's a poison.
Yeah. They've been known.
Lots of classic literature.
Exactly. I was about to ask you. Do you know who famously died of poison from coniine?
Oh, was it Romeo or Juliet?
I don't know this one, maybe, but I was
who else?
I was thinking about Socrates.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yep.
When he was condemned to death because of what was the reason? Corruption of the youth and impiety toward the gods. he basically wrote a bit too much against the religion at the time.
Yeah, against the church at the time, and they were not happy.
They condemned him sentences to death, and he had to drink one of these beverage made of this plant. So the Greek were using it a lot to kill people. In fact, there is also in a Agatha Christie book. It's used in the mystery novel Five Little Pigs. By the way, that's also the poison which is used. And the reason it's being used for years is because it's common. You can find it almost everywhere in the northern hemisphere, in European countries specifically, and is known to be killing people, to be dangerous to animals and humans as well for years. So this poison exists, and that's the poison that is secreted by the slug, probably into the slimes. But what is not realistic here is that humans seems to die after a few minutes or seconds. Coniine kill people in a way longer period of time, like hours. And the way they
it's respiratory failure, right? So so it doesn't happen instantaneously.
It's a paralysis of the organs, so you cannot breathe and the heart stops beating as well. So it takes a long time. But it's a science fiction, and you could not have people suffering in front of the show for 1.5 hours. They shorten it to a few seconds.
That would slow the episode down.
That would slow the episode, yes. And it would not be that pleasant anyway. So, but I think it's remarkable that they use something that exists, and I learned a lot looking for the source of this poison and reading the literature a bit and the web. It's kind of it was an entertaining morning, I would say, thanks to that.
I'm curious. I know you probably don't know this off the top of your head, but whether that particular molecule is in anything like any organism, like a slug, something not quite like a plant, but something that could move around, or I don't know, probably not. But
I did not find an animal capable of secreting this.
Secreting it.
Yeah,
it would make sense from an evolutionary perspective for some sort of organism to have the ability to secrete it, right? I mean, they don't show it in the show, but I would imagine that this would help the slug maintain its position in the ecosystem or even get energy, right?
You can imagine, for instance, the slug is using this to feed itself with fish in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe someone will tell me that I'm wrong and there is animal secreting this neurotoxin. So please let us know. I'm willing to learn stuff, and I'm not a biologist, so ready to be corrected by one of.
We're ready to be educated on this neurotoxin. Okay, so should we move to the things in people's eyes?
The green blindness.
The green
the
blindness.
Way also his name. I've discovered also that. So maybe you remember that what's happening in the show.
Well, everyone is sort of having this discharge and their vision is slowly going, and Dr. Okoye does a couple scans and she realizes that there are tiny microorganisms in people's eyes that are hurting the eye and, making their home there, getting all their energy. And the result of that is that everybody is going blind. And they don't know how Holden is not affected by this infection, I guess you could say.
So, and it's interesting, there is this scene in this episode where he walks to again, Dr. Elvi Okoye, and they have this casual conversation because he wants to do take another blood sample. He said, well, we already have done 2. There is nothing wrong in your blood. There is nothing I can see. And then while she's speaking, she realized that there is one thing she didn't test is what they call eye fluid. And then we have this fantastic scene. And I wonder, Margaret, if you watch it or you close your eye, where Holden is basically taking a sample of his eye fluid by puncturing the eye itself. So,
well, all I could think about during that scene was I actually had eye surgery that required 2 steps, and one of them was punching a hole in a part of my eye over the last year. And then when I had my eye surgery, because it's eye surgery, I was awake and I could see some moving instruments. So I was able to stomach the scene. I just don't know how Holden was able to do that himself, because I would not have been able to puncture or do anything to my eye myself. So good on him. He's in a desperate situation. I did like how they the shot panned towards him, and then right when he was about to make contact, they pulled away, because it would have been gross.
I did not see that. I closed my eyes.
You close your eyes? You're the scientist. I was able to handle it. My goodness. Maybe I should be an eye surgeon.
Yes. So after, and this is also science in action, this machine, this magical machine that can analyze samples very quickly and deliver the content of a sample at the level of molecules, which is absolutely amazing. It does not exist yet for medicine. But this machine basically delivers some results, which are okay. There is nothing special. But then Dr. Okoye say, well, you are going to have to do a treatment against cancer because you have cancer cells, obviously. And then Holden basically mentioned that he has this patch that is basically helpful for him because he has been irradiated on Eros, and he knows that he has this cancer cell. He said the word oncocidal drugs, which are drugs that have been used to destroy or to mitigate the effect of cancer cells. And there's a ton of drugs to do that. Can be drugs that boost the immune system, drugs that capture this cancer cell. We are in the future. We don't know the details, but this patch is basically provided a treatment almost continuously, so Holden will not develop a cancer in the future by destroying those cancer cells when they are in the blood. So this is interesting because it's really science in action, and more than science, medicine in action. Often when you go to see your doctor, you have a conversation, and sometimes your doctor asks you random questions and say, why is he asking me these questions? And that's exactly that. Because sometimes there is the human body is so complex that we don't really understand all the effect of drugs on another, etc. But that's what Dr. Okoye realized quickly, is there is a link between these oncocidal drugs and probably the fact that this Holden does not develop this green blindness. We don't know the details, but it's probably related to the fact that those bacteria or microbes are not able to develop as quickly as in the case of Holden because of this treatment. Somehow this treatment may kind of eliminate them or does not allow them to develop quickly in his eyes. So his body is getting rid of them faster. And that's the theory I have behind this. But I really like this scene because it started with, we want to do a blood test. Let's do a test. Let's do an eye fluid test instead. Oh, you have cancer. Yes, I know. Oh, my baby, that's the treatment and it's very science. Sometimes like this linear way of thinking bring you to a big eureka moment. And you can see the eureka moment in the eyes of Dr. Elvi Okoye.
Yes, and this is also one of my favorite parts of the episode because the way that she finds out is she says, "Oh, you have these precancerous cells. You're going to need to get treatment." And Holden says, "Oh yeah, I know. I got radiated, and I have this, situation." And she puts her hand on his shoulder, and he thinks that she's comforting him. And he says, "Oh, thank you so much." And she's like, "No, stop! I'm trying to feel for your pump." And that's how she realizes that's what. And it's also just funny to me because I have doctors in my family, and there's always this conversation about bedside manner and doctors being very emotionally intelligent. But in that moment, she was like, "No, I'm not trying to comfort you. I don't have bedside manner. I'm trying to get to the answer to save everybody." So I thought that was great characterization.
So then we can see how she fixed this problem is amazing. She basically asked the reference on the patch, and then she has this magical machine. You remember that probably the one that she brought with her too.
That mass produces.
That is capable of
medicine.
3D printing medicines, drugs. We don't have that yet, and that's something that I hope we are gonna have soon. Some tiny machine. I don't know. We don't see the size of the thing, but she's something that she carries with her, and capable of from a few elements, capable of building chemical elements, complex chemical elements. So I think it's 3D printing of in chemistry that she can do with this machine, and it cure everybody apparently.
Yeah, well, and I will say it was a little eerie to see everybody lining up to get their shots, and I think there's some current parallels to that.
Yeah, it's interesting how some people do it believing in science, and basically they do it because it's for the good of humanity. In this case, of a small group of people, but it's for everybody. Because there is something. I
don't think anybody I don't think anybody in that situation was saying no. That's all I'll say.
Something interesting that they say in the show is that the reason for which they get blind so quickly compared to when they were on the planet is because they live together in a small and close environment. So they give each other the microbes, and very quickly the microbes in the eyes of everybody. So
yes, and it's not clear if it's airborne or tactile. I would imagine it's probably spreading because somebody's wiping their eye and putting their hands on something that somebody else is, because they're in such a small area, is touching. Right, to your point. Or it could, if it's air, you're breathing the same air in this small little place. So yes, nobody wants to transfer germs through gross green eye discharge. Gross. But what's interesting about this is that I think that they had to do very visual cues to show that somebody was getting sick, which is why you see this, somebody's look changes. But a lot of times you don't have that, right? You don't have, and that's why viruses or infections spread, because you can't really see. Somebody's usually spreading it before you can see physically, or before they even feel ill, which is what's scary. So, but interesting. What else should we talk about for Illis?
Well, we can talk about what happened in Orbit.
Sure. Should we talk about the episode name first? Because I think.
Oh yes, the episode.
Yes.
I wanted to show off. I have a.
What's the
name of the episode?
The name of the episode is The One-Eyed Man.
Okay, so this is coming from Marchis say it, right? In the land of
Marchis
the blind,
says the whole adage, yes.
Yeah, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So I did some research because this morning I was like, yeah, I need to know that. I need to remember this one. And in fact, it's a true quote from Desiderius Erasmus Roterodamus, who was, we can call him Erasmus of Rotterdam. So he was a Dutch philosopher and also a priest, Catholic priest. And he wrote a lot about the Renaissance and so on. So he's very known. And European knows him because the program called Erasmus comes from him, by the way. It's a program for student exchange throughout Europe. But what he wrote, he didn't write that in English, because at the time he didn't write in English. He wrote it in Latin, and it was In Regione Soccorum Rex es Luscus, which is in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I found out the pronunciation by looking on Google Translate. So Google Translate read Latin very well. I studied Latin when I was 12 years old, but I forgot most of it. But Google Translate can read Latin very well. Cannot translate well though. That doesn't work well, but it does read well Latin apparently. So yeah, that's coming from this Catholic priest. This title of 1460, so 1470.
I think Mutri is saying it because he has to follow Holden, even though he doesn't believe in what Holden is trying to do, but he's sort of capitulating and saying, I have no choice in a way, even though I don't agree with you. Because that's sort of the adage, right? Is that somebody who may not be super special will be super special in a bunch of around a bunch of people who are not perhaps as smart. And I also think it's, on a more, what's the word I'm looking for? On a more just on its face, everybody's blind, and Holden really is leading them around. If you're being more literal, that's the word I was looking for, rather than looking at it as a metaphor. So I did think it was interesting, a lot of the ways that Holden was helping people, kind of being their guiding light.
Killing the slug, bringing them to the bathroom, talking to each other, comforting them, especially I forgot Amos has a nervous breakdown, for instance. Yeah, it's
that was
tough situation for him. He's by himself, alone with 100 people, and he has to take care of everybody and he's the only one capable of seeing, so he's the only one who can basically make sure that no slugs come inside the camp, and make sure that they don't lose it completely, because stressful situation.
Very desperate. Well, there's also another desperate situation, which is what's happening in orbit. So do you want to give us a recap?
Yes. So we remember the Barb, which is the spacecraft used by the miners to come from Ganymede to Ilus. This real name is Barba Piccola. It's basically in orbit, but it doesn't have its fusion reactor working, the Epstein drive, and same for the Rocinante. But the Rocinante has some kind of auxiliary reactor. I don't know made of what. I don't know the details, but they do work, such as the Rocinante can modify its position and slightly move as well. So the Barb is too low in orbit compared to the Rocinante. So it's coming so close to the atmosphere of the planet Ilus that the atmosphere is slowing down the Barb. And by slowing down the Barb, by friction, the Barb is going lower and lower. So we're going to reach a moment for which it will be a catastrophic, basically, drag, and the Barb will basically sink into the planet and burn into the atmosphere.
Which would not be good for everybody on it, right?
Yes, I forgot to mention there was people on the Barb. So I'm so scientific that I forgot about it. That's why I have
a lot of people would die. But yes, so they're in a dire situation.
Exactly. So the Rocinante they discussed and they found a solution. The Barb is a mining facility, a mining spaceship, and it has this mining net, if I remember. And they prepare a rope, which is made of this material, which seems to be extremely solid and capable of holding a high tension. Mm-hmm. And they basically connect. Very simple. They put the Rocinante as low as possible, 800 meters, because that's the length of the cable. And they connect the Rocinante to the Barb with this cable. So we have this wonderful scene where the Rocinante eject a drone, a space drone, which is kind of super cool. To go to get the cable, they attach the cable from the Barb all the way to the Rocinante. And then they attach the Rocinante with a system of pulley to kind of stabilize the thing, because you don't want to have too much pressure because the cable will break. So they have this system to stabilize, which is mechanical engineering that I don't know anything about, frankly.
But it's amazing.
Shout
out to mechanical engineers.
Exactly. They are very useful, as you know. Because of them, we have bridge, buildings, telescopes, and etc. So kudos to these people. And I always say that to my mechanical engineers working with us, because I'm always impressed by what they can do.
Yes, I'm glad that they exist.
So then the Rocinantes go at higher altitude, dragging the Barb with it. And it seems to be working fine, saving the Barb.
Yes, which makes me nervous, because generally in the show, when things are going fine, something bad happens, but we'll see. But for now, it's safe.
So do you know where come from the name Barba Piccola?
No. What is it? Tell me in your research what you found.
It's coming from Giuseppa Eleonora Barba Piccola. She was an Italian natural philosopher, poet, and translator. And she translated a very famous book by René Descartes, The Principles of Philosophy. She's known for that. And she was an advocate for education for women.
Love her.
I learned that this morning too. I didn't know. So
you've had a very enlightening morning.
This morning was enlightening. And that's the reason I like doing this show, because every time I discover some cool thing like that. I didn't know the existence of Giuseppa Barba Piccola. I'm kind of ashamed of it, frankly, but okay.
The world building, we've talked about this so much, but I could talk about it for a really long time. The world building in the show and in the books, because the show builds off the books, is amazing. Everything is very well thought through. I was thinking about it again in the scenes on Medina Station, because you can hear the grav boots clicking constantly when people are. It's just great. I love it. And what you just pointed out is another excellent example of the world building and the attention to detail that goes into this property. Anything else on orbit? Because there's one other interesting thing that happens on Illis that I think we should end on.
I'm not aware of this. Go ahead.
It's the last scene when Miller appears, the proto-molecule alien Miller version appears, and it looks like it's sort of, what is the word? It's glitching. Malfunction? That's the word. There are lots of words. It's like having a meltdown, malfunction. It's glitching, and it looks like the entity that's taken the shape of Miller is trying to speak, but no sounds are coming out until the very end, when Holden hears a scream. So something's going on. We don't know what yet. Yes. I was actually curious. I had forgotten the end of this episode, and it seemed like everything was resolving. They'd figured out the issues with the green microbes and blindness. They'd figured out the Barb, and then they hit us with that cliffhanger at the very end where we don't know what's going on. So I guess we'll have to see.
We will see. Next episode.
Yes.
So in 2 weeks?
Next episode. In 2 weeks. Yes, we only have 3 more, maybe 2 or 3. So we're getting towards the end, which is very exciting. Some interesting stuff happens. But anything else? Parting words, parting wisdom from you, Franck, that you found this morning or earlier?
No, thank you very much, Margaret. Always a pleasure to talk to you about this show. I love it.
It is. Yes. Love doing it. We love that you find it interesting, that you're viewing this, please hit any of the buttons below where you can get updated on new episodes of the Grudge Report. You can learn about the SETI Institute, which is where we both work, and this wonderful show is a product of the SETI Institute. Or you could even donate, because the SETI Institute is a nonprofit that is focused on understanding and finding life throughout the universe. So I have a feeling that if you like this show, you'd like the SETI Institute, so check us out and stay tuned for our next episode. Have a good day or evening.
Or afternoon.
Wherever you are. Or good afternoon, good evening, good night.
Bye.